You're listening to The Adventuring Party, talking about gaming the Irish way.
Welcome to the party. I'm Owen.
I'm Liam.
And I'm Shane.
And today, we are here to discuss that most dynamic and multi-layered of approaches in an RPG, topography. By which I mean maps and how to make a fight more interesting with multi-layers in a map. You know, like, because fights should have layers and also layers because it should be up and down, not just 2D. Guys, any thoughts on maps and combat?
I mean, I guess it's become more pertinent and more relevant with the advent. I guess not advent, wide adoption of online play. I mean, like, say advent is probably being a bit fair because it was there and people were doing it, but it wasn't anywhere near as common as it is now in our isolation days. Before, if you wanted to get really complex, you either had your battle map and you explained, this is a hill, this is a thing, this is a ledge, you need to spend an action climbing these crates to get up onto that ledge, something like that, on your map, and it'd be drawn out. Or you go the other way, and, you know, for the more extreme of us, such as our fellow host Savage, who are very into making terrain and modelling terrain, you would have to model that terrain and put it down. Whereas now, you know, you can easily build in, certainly the more advanced of the VTTs like Foundry, you can draw terrain walls whereby, well, here you go, what's that? Well, that's a cliff. Okay, well, how do you know it's a cliff? Well, you know, it's drawn on the map, and when you're up here, you can see down. When you're down here, you can't see up. Like, you can get very sophisticated with it. So I think it's probably more relevant now than it's ever been.
Absolutely. Shane, combats in featureless square rooms versus combats with a bunch of stuff in the way.
Well, obviously, like, if you want interesting combats that aren't like previously solved on some forum on the internet before dice have ever been picked up, you want to have loads of terrain, lots of features, tables to jump off of, plates to throw at people. You know, you want all that stuff, but it comes with an overhead. It's just like a lot of people, like GMs, I think it's called keying a dungeon and making sure that every room has a whole bunch of features in it. That's a bit of overhead that not everyone is, ready to do. Now, to be fair, if you have a pre-planned dungeon, it's a lot easier because you can, just put in the effort and say, well, room 3 has tables and chairs, room 4 has carpet, room 5 has another carpet, but it's actually a monster. You know, that's easier to do in a pre-planned dungeon that you've already got a map for. If you're doing some kind of spontaneous urban encounter because, like, you rolled a random thing, it was pickpockets, and the players decided that the correct response to pickpocketing was fireballing half the town. That's a slightly different system, and if you are desperately trying to scribble together a map of a half-burning town in front of your players, all of a sudden little details like where all the rubble is might get lost in the shuffle. And of course, then, have you drawn it big enough so that everyone at your very large table, or if you have no table, the people at the other end of the room on your other couch, can they see the map that you've drawn, or are they just pretending to look at it and then imagining in their head and then jumping off the imaginary tables and climbing the imaginary buildings? So,
like, is there space here to do something like, actually, here is the big book of dungeon features, and one of the things you do is you go, guys, here's a list of 20 terrain features in a dungeon, like a chair, right? So what's a chair for? So, okay, you can do two things with a chair. You can pick it up as a bonus action, and it gives you +1 AC or +2 AC against the next attack against you, and you discard it. Or you can kick it at somebody, and you get +1 to hit because they're fending off the chair when you come in with them. And then it becomes like, I just roll on this table to see what's in the room. I roll 3 times. There's a chair, there's a table, 2 chairs, there's a chandelier, and there's a brazier. And all of these things can be utilised in the fight then.
I think that...
And then basically...
That takes a bit of the fun out of it. For people who enjoy that kind of spontaneous play, I think having a table that formalises it would probably take away the joy of it. You know, to spontaneously swing it at the chandelier is something that you're like, aha, you know, I'll do it with a plum, and, you know, maybe I'll get some panache or something. But if you were to have a table with chandelier on it and the effects that you can swing at it as chandelier, I think it would probably make it dry and not fun. And let's face it, if you're doing that kind of thing, you're probably not doing it for a mechanical gain. You're probably doing it because it's cool and fun.
It does make you pay more attention to the description of the room, and the layout of the room, and go, oh, I can use that now. Oh, I can use that. There's an open fire. I can kick someone into that. I can do something else like that. I can do some stuff here. There's some extra edge I can obtain by doing this.
Any game with rigid rules around movement and charging and stuff like that will make you pay a lot of attention to the terrain, because certainly with 3.5 and Pathfinder, only being able to charge in a straight line unless you were a very specific class with a very specific ability, good night. It was quite frustrating. It's like, there's a chair in the way. Yeah, I'm just going to kick it out of the way as I'm charging through. You know, that will make people really pay attention, and it's one thing. In general, games have moved away from that, and I'm quite glad of that.
I think that's sort of
like they might just you just pay 2 squares of movement or moves right at 1 square is in general how stuff being in the way or move around it is how things have gone in general, and I'm glad of that anyway.
Yeah, the thing is, like, no one set of people is going to have the same approach to this kind of creativity. Some people would rather sort of do the feng shui thing of just declare, oh yes, there's a table and chairs in this room. I picked up the table and beat someone with it. And some people will only think of that sort of stuff if you explicitly point out on the map there's a table and chairs. Oh, what can I do with that? And some people will want, you know, a little note besides saying, if you pick this up, you will have +1 AC for this turn. Different players are going to have different levels of mechanical depth that they want. Some will want a fully done out expression, because then they know, well, I could use my bonus action to cast my Hunter's Mark, but I never remember to do that, so instead I'll pick up this chair this turn. And some people will just want to sort of will tables and chairs out of the fictional ether and say, well, obviously,
summon chair.
These orcs are playing cards, so I pick up the cards, fling them in their thing, and give them paper cuts. You know, that sort of thing. It's just like you have to sort of... The thing about this kind of terrain features and stuff is that you sort of have to set a common bar for your group of, like, this is the level of detail we'll go into beforehand, and this is the level that you're able to make up or ask me about. That sort of...
But if you systemize it as a GM, you'll empower your players. Because they know, I can just always use a chair to do this, or I can use a chair to do that. And they don't have to ask you for permission. They don't have to kind of clear it with you. They can be like, oh no, he said there were 2 chairs here, and I can use chairs to do this, and I'm going to think about that. I'm going to use a chair to block for the guy or toss it at somebody. And that's kind of cool and effective at the same time. And it doesn't speed down play with going, Mother, may I? Hey, GM, can I use the chair to do... Or they can just go, no, I can just do this. I'm empowered by that. Like, I get what you're saying, but some people feel the creativity. I want to be able to come up with a cool idea. But you empower the player by going, no, this is how it works. You can use this stuff wherever you want. And they're a minor bonus, but minor bonuses add up. So why don't you use them? And lets you pay attention to the environment. Go, okay, what can I do? How can I get a little extra edge when I need to? In what might be a tough fight, you know?
Well,
I think there's virtue to systemizing it. There's vices as well. There's issues where everything's just... There's a rule for everything, isn't there? And yes, there are, but, you know, you don't have to use them. It's just that they're there if you want to.
Well, I think the debate on whether players like the Mother May I system or not is possibly a different episode, but the sort of the basis of the systemizing it is going to help a lot of people, I think. But you see, when you say something like doing this little bonus gives you a cool effect, often you have to think about, like, what is that cool effect in regards of my game? Because, just an example, a lot of the stuff that you could do in 3.5 or Pathfinder was really, really useful and effective at, like, level 1, level 2. Because you get your +1 AC or +2 to hit, and that made a huge difference. And then you would get to, like, level 10, and you already had, like, huge bonuses from various things, and often you were spending your bonus or swift or reactions doing other class features, and suddenly the opportunity cost of doing these cool little terrain features would be just blown out of the water by what you could do natively. So there's a system impact too, and if you want that kind of thing to have an impact, you need to really think about, like, what is important in the system I'm playing, and will it be important at the levels I want it to be important at, I guess. Because, like, yeah, you don't want your cool fights to turn into flat, 10 square by 10 square rooms, 5 orcs. But at a certain point, you might have to level up your terrain features as well. Because, like, maybe at level 2 or 3, having a table and chair and a chandelier to swing off of, those are useful. But if you're, like, level 10, level 12, you might need to start having, like, lightning pillars or anti-gravity jump pads, or the robot turrets that have been sleeping for 1,000 years, but the gem of Thargon will waken them.
Depends on the system, because I know when I was Pathfinder 2nd edition, and to an extent 5th ed D&D, +1 to hit is valuable at every level, because the math is scaled so tightly. It's like, +1 to hit, that's always good. Oh, but isn't it terrible at level 20? No, it's still amazing at level 20. It's still 5% more chance to hit, 5% more chance to crit. And that the numbers don't unspool at any point. They're tight where they are. So it does depend on the system there.
I guess
what you're doing.
I'd just be worried about the person who is, casting Unseen Servant before every fight and getting the Unseen Servant to go grab a chair, and then, for every single room, everywhere they go, they're just carrying this furniture assortment around on their floating disc, so that they can always have a chair to throw under the legs of the bad guy to make it difficult terrain or something.
Maybe they had the background of being a professional furniture mover beforehand. It's like, beware of a man who always has a supply of ready folding chairs to hit people with.
And that's
what wrestling has taught us everything.
That's why they sit weirdly down on a chair.
Absolutely.
And stand leg cocked high.
You can just imagine the monk with the wizard multiclass for Unseen Servant, and the Unseen Servant just passes him a chair and hit another guy with, like, punch, bam. I was like,
I believe that's why Jonathan Frakes played Riker on Next Gen stands weirdly all the time. That he used to be a furniture mover, and when he was just before he got cast in Next Gen, he wrecked his back.
Jacked his back. Has never been able to sit properly since. He has to step over the chair. Like, look at me.
And is always resting, so he has the leg up high and stuff.
Yeah. Stretch the back. Ooh. So that's the micro features on a little bit thinking about terrain and going, we should maybe chairs should matter, maybe pots should matter. Like, should you be able to hit a guy from behind with a pot and maybe stun him or give him a penalty on his action?
I just think you need to be wary about all these things that they supplant and may be more powerful than actual class abilities. Because what the hell's the point? Why am I a monk with stunning fist if somebody can just grab a pot and lash him in the back of the head with it?
You make it a little less effective, but I always think that someone getting hit in the head from behind with a pot is hilarious.
Oh, it's comic gold, particularly if there's a single flower left standing on their head. Maybe it wilts as well.
Maybe the first time every dungeon someone hits someone with a pot, it's just funny.
Sure,
Well,
I think before we move on from that terrain and stuff, I think it's actually worthwhile. Like, I'm notoriously lazy when it comes to actually prepping dungeons, but one thing that I've been doing, it's one of the things I've taken advantage of with the lockdown and having a bit more time on my hands, was every time I went into the gaming shop in town, in Gamers World, they have a whole bunch of the WizKids miniatures, and one thing that they have a lot of is just random tents, random boxes, sign with lots of letters and stuff on it. And I've now assembled actually quite a good chunk. With that and bones, I've assembled quite a good chunk of dungeon furniture. And if I ever get to run a game that's set in a dungeon or set in a forest, you know what? Those camps are going to be full of tents, and they're going to be full of little fireplaces, and they're going to be full of everything. And I think it does add a lot to a game. And if you have a decent stable, like if you have 30 or 40 pieces of this dungeon furniture, which you can collect easy enough over time, like those miniatures are about $5 each for the pack. So, you know, buying it all at once is actually quite a sum. But just buying a little bit here and a little bit there and painting it, you know, one a fortnight, one a month. Over the course of a year or two, you end up with quite a large selection, and you can decorate nearly any dungeon with, okay, I'll take the chairs and put them here, and then I'll take the barrels, and okay, there you go. It's a little storeroom, which has a table and chairs in it as well. Then you go into the next room, and there's a torture chamber, Iron Maiden. There's an Iron Maiden in it. Yep. Not a guillotine, because, you know, you have to start a guillotine somewhere.
Wiz Kids are also doing the Warlock tiles. They've done the whole, you can effectively build a whole dungeon, its floors, its walls. Yep. They're doing curved walls now and angles now. But they've also done a bunch of set dressing ones, which are really nice. Whenever I see some, I'm often I pick some up. They're not the easiest to find, to be honest, but the whole thing of, ooh, look, there's a town square, there's stalls, there's, you know, stocks. That's gold.
Yep.
If you want to set up and like setting up big set piece fights with a lot of like scenery and stuff is cool. It makes players go, woo, there's stuff going on. That's great stuff. That's just value.
There's a bunch of stuff as well that you can do. Like for the VTTs, there's a whole bunch of packs of tile packs and map packs and stuff that you can get for just adding these kind of things. Like, you know, there's I mean, like I'll put up some links in the show notes, or probably in the Discord, just to various little modules you can tie in. And with that, you can just plonk tables down, and depending on the system you're using, there might be different layers and stuff involved. But yeah, they add a lot.
There's some really cool ideas. There was the guys working on the Kickstarter for the procedurally generating 3D dungeon map.
Oh, nice.
And I'm trying to remember, it was Alchemist or something. It looks really cool if it works the way it's meant to work. Well, we'll see. But it's a really cool idea for, okay, you just draw space and you go, this room's a kitchen. It plonks down a bunch of random kitchen stuff in the room. You know? And that's so there's a lot of really cool stuff there, creative stuff. Now, in the macro sense about maps, one of the interesting things I found when you really spend a lot of time exploring a dungeon on a battle map, you start to notice occasionally how bad blockages can be.
Yep.
Like we're all coming up to a door and then the bad guys beat us on initiative and rush over to the door, and then we're stuck fighting in a doorway with two melee PCs at the front and then a bunch of bad guys and a bunch of other people behind them going, I guess I can shoot a spell in. And the other person going, well, I got my fists, so can I jump over? And terrain becomes a real dynamic factor in the combat, determining actually a lot of who wins the fight or who does well in the fight or how difficult the fight is.
Yeah, well, I mean, the encounters can be trivialized just with good initiative, because whereas before there was a whole bunch of undead guys that have no range capabilities, where before they were all going to swarm you, instead you're in a doorway and they can only come at you one or two at a time.
Yeah.
You know, so it can be to your benefit and your drawback, and that's one thing that continually frustrates me as a player when somebody goes, oh, I'm up first, right? Well, rather than delaying or rather than coming to this doorway and holding it to make sure the bad guys don't get past, I'll charge into the middle of the room so I get attacked by 4 or 5 people.
Yeah, it's part of the.
If you're into tactical combat, it adds a lot.
Yeah,
it is something to think. Like terrain does affect fights. The question is, does it affect the fight in the way that you want? Because it's like some people having that 2 desperate tanks, holding things off while people throw rocks over their heads to hit the orcs. That's great. For others, it's like very frustrating because, well, I didn't come here to throw rocks. I came here to cast fireballs and lightning bolts, and I can't lightning bolt through the. My last wizard learned that lesson. I can't lightning bolt through the fighter.
Well, yeah. Like it's important. Like if you look, even if you just look at like one-on-one martial arts, like jockeying and moving around for position and trying to get an opening is everything. looking back at, if you read any of the records of historical battles, a huge amount of it is we move around. Oh, they got the high ground. Let's withdraw. And literally the battle is decided by who takes whatever piece of terrain or who gets onto whatever terrain and gets set up. Can I get these guys? Oh, these guys are going to be crossing this river. Can I get them and separate them? While they're crossing that river, like terrain is massive.
Absolutely. I think one of the things I'd say about it is that terrain can completely change how a fight feels. Like you can take on 5 orc archers in one circumstance and it's trivial, and you take them on another circumstance and it's, oh my god, this is the spellcaster's day because the rest of us are just, it's too hard to get up to them. They're up on this building and it's all walkways. They've got blockages on and we're moving up and getting stuck in this difficult terrain. We have to haul over the blockages.
There's no drain pipe.
Oh my god. Well, someone just kill them for range. They're like, okay, well, pew pew pew. Stinking cloud up there. I mean, that's huge.
I ran the same Pathfinder adventure twice. There's one of the PFS games that has a ranger standing on a roof, and they're very really focused ranger, favorite enemy human, everything like that. And the first party just got eviscerated. Absolutely eviscerated. They managed to win the day, but it was like the bad guy's tactic of when they're below 25% of their hit points, they leave. It was looking like it was going to be a wipe. And then the next game, witch cast blindness, fight over.
Absolutely.
But,
that's an interesting thing where you can have a dungeon, say, which has thematically got a lot of the same bad guys over again, but you can ramp up the difficulty or ramp up the challenge by changing the terrain. Like you fight these guys and go, okay, right, these guys are really nasty at range, but they're not that dangerous in melee. Okay, we know that now. And then the next fight, you've got one guy who's dangerous in melee holding you off from a bunch of guys at the back. And you're like, oh, okay. We're kind of learning here how to fight these guys. We need to minimize that guy. And we need to hit that guy. Hit these other guys, get up in their grill. So it's all about getting around the melee guy. And you can have other things. Like, I think that something to be considered in every adventure is something dangerous or somebody to be pushed into periodically or pushed off. I think it's tremendous fun to push a bad guy off a cliff. I think it's tremendous fun to push something into a fire or into a mill wheel or into a crusher or into a saw blade. Yeah. That's great when you set it up and do it.
Especially because most of the time it's not really an option on the table. So I guess the times that it's possible, it's like, aha, I got a clever idea.
I think 2 or 3 opportunities for that in every dungeon floor is a good thing. Because it can be like, ooh, this is what the fight's about now.
Yeah.
And, maybe like the whole fight is on or section of the fight is on a runway that's basically a treadmill, like a giant treadmill. Do you know Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, where he's fighting on the kind of the strip and he's being pulled along and he's fighting the guy and there's a crusher and you got to roll up and push the other guy down, Yeah. Eventually the guy gets squished. That's great stuff.
And then in Last Crusade where the guy gets hit by the plane engine.
Yeah.
Yeah, regularly.
You can do every so often. That's a really cool little extra bit of flavor in a fight. Mix things up. Go, okay, this is what this is about. One of my favorite kills of a end of a campaign boss in Adventure Path was when we pushed him off the edge of a 150-foot tower and he died. I went, yeah. And all we did was we just charged into the guy. He was 10 foot away from the edge. I said, I think we can get this guy. And 3 of us charged up and each went for a shove, and some of us shoved him back, some of us failed. And we got him right to the edge, and then what he did was he went 3 attacks into my character and bait the hell out of me, and I was like, and then she was like, ooh, he really got a little too aggressive there. He probably should have used one of those moves to move away from the edge. And then the animal companion goes barreling up and knocks him right off the edge. We're like, yay, down he goes.
It's nice when it comes up because I know certainly my current Pathfinder Society character is a champion with a halberd, and with the reach specialization, you can, if you critical, you can move somebody 5 feet. And I mean, I think a handful of times I've been able to use it to push somebody into a flank.
Yep.
that's it. And the rest of the time, it's just like, you can move them 5 feet. Not going to bother. Why? They're already in your flank, so...
Or they're super huge. It's like, shifting this guy 5 isn't doing this anything really.
Yeah.
But if the stuff to push people into or push people off, that's great. It's really great, you know? Just as an option every so often to have that little bit of difference.
Yeah, but then you have to ask, does your RPG have shoving mechanics, for want of a better word? Does it have those types of things where I move them 5 feet, or I can trick someone into running past me like a bull with a red cape and make them fall off an edge? Does it have that kind of ability?
Does it have fairly realistic falling damage?
Yeah.
I know, certainly in some iterations of D&D, it was like, okay, I fell off a cliff. Oh, this is going to hurt a bit, but I'll get up and climb.
Yeah.
That's true.
But, that's the thing.
Other games have had really vicious falling damage, though, so it varies, you know? I remember Star Wars SAG Edition, falling damage is a great way to die. Wait, this bypasses my vitality and goes straight to my wounds? Yeah, it's falling damage. Ooh, let's not get pushed off anything, guys. Let's not get pushed off anything without a jetpack.
And then Palpatine forgot this.
So there's a lot to be said about having terrain there for interesting fights. There's a lot to be said for having terrain there to kind of, I think, produce unique set pieces. That you can see them as being, this is a fight that's a bit weird, a bit challenging. And maybe it's only difficult because of the terrain. And maybe the bad guys are a bit underpowered, but because of the terrain, they've got a real advantage. Like, let's say you had a fight where you were fighting Skaven. And you're okay, we can beat Skaven. But the Skaven are fighting on bungee cords. So they're popping down, hitting you, and then going back up. And you're like, the hell is this? Yeah, they're bouncing up and down on their rat-a-pulley systems. What? You got little bit of rats up there running up and down. It's winding them up and down as they hit you. They use this for construction, but in this case, the Stormvermin reason to pop down, hit you with their halberd, and come back up. And you're like, he comes down, hits me, and then goes back up. And I'm like, yeah. So he's at the top at the start of my turn. Yeah. So I can hit him in melee. Yeah. What do? Well, that's up to you to figure out. Maybe you climb up the structure and start sabotaging the pulleys. Maybe you pull out your gun and start plinking away at the guy, you know? But you have to think of a different way to fight this. And there's a lot of value in that, especially if the players have gotten very comfortable with one set of tactics. Just engage in melee, blunch. Engage in melee, blunch. You know? Ways to make the players go, I need to be a little bit smarter in this fight. And maybe it sums up stuff like, is there a ready action? Well, maybe there is, maybe there isn't. Okay, ready an action to attack. Because sometimes when you're fighting invisible guys, that's the best way to do it. He's going to decloak and hit us. So I'm going to ready an action to attack. Someone hits me, I'm going to punch it back. You know? So that's good. It makes players think, okay, I can't use my standard tactics. I can't use my favourite tactics. I have to think a little bit here. And that's good every so often. Not every fight, but every so often. Little curveball.
I guess you just have to watch going too far with that, because certainly I know I've played some games where it was just like, oh yeah, great, and what else have they got? Magic broomsticks or something, you know? Like, it just seems like there are specific encounters that are just written just to be like, screw you PCs, I don't care how well prepared you were, I'm going to pull this nonsense and you're going to have a hell of a time on it. I can't think of any specific examples, but...
Yeah, I know, there's a bunch of different ones. We will do some of the deadliest encounter.
Oh, yeah.
It's the ultimate sometimes food. But it's a good one to throw in there. Because if you're doing 5 or 6 fights in a row with a similar opposition, they run the risk of getting samey. You got to throw a little bit of a curveball in there to make that one was a bit different. Interesting. And it's a great way to seed an idea. Something like this is going to happen again. If you do a fight with basically a lot of terrain, a lot of being pushed off it, that's a great... Against an easy opponent is a great way to make the players think, you know, maybe we should get something to deal with difficult terrain or make difficult terrain less bad. We've been fighting an awful lot of ghosts down here. And they're coming through walls. Maybe we should do something about that, you know? And that's an important way. And it's important to kind of warn your players a little first with an easy iteration of it. Kind of warn them, ooh, this could get annoying. Like, if you've got a guy, basically a barbarian, who's just like, I have a 2-handed axe. Everything falls to the axe. Whack, whack, whack. and you do a range fight, the barbarian's like, ooh, I don't have any javelins on my character sheet. Mm-hmm. I should really go get some javelins, because I am doing nothing in this fight. Or I need to pick up that raging jump feat where I can basically jump really far, and then I can get over a gap. You know? So something like that it's a good idea to kind of give them a hint first that that's going to happen, and then later on that pays off. Maybe it's 4 or 5 sessions down the road, this sort of fight comes up again. They're like, oh yes, that's why I bought this yoke. Or maybe give them some targeted loot. Boots of Flying. I better put on these Boots of Flying. I feel like it's going to come up later.
Yeah,
You know?
I guess the peril there is with the Boots of Flying is that you end up telegraphing the fight, you know?
Yes.
We just found a whole bunch of fire resistance potions. I guess we're going to get down into some kind of lava cavern to fight somebody. Or resistance to poison. Somebody's going to use poison attacks.
If someone's paying attention to that, that's good play. They're engaged with the game. They're going, hang on. We've been getting gear that will help us out against this sort of fight. I think we should start prepping for that sort of fight. What are we going to do in that sort of fight?
I'd just be wary because I know I've played some adventure paths and some games where they nearly seem to do that before every fight with anything interesting in it. In which case, when eventually they don't telegraph it, it seems like a real jip because they're like, what the hell? There was this thing that uses petrification, but like we weren't like given like a stone to flesh potion in advance. What the hell? Like, well, you need to be prepared. But every other fight you had, it was giving you like water breathing potions and all this kind of stuff when there was an underwater fight. So people can get lazy, I guess, or get complacent if they're spoon fed something to potentially remedy the danger.
Absolutely. But I think it's worth thinking about. It's worth going, okay, well, maybe you give a hint. But there's a lot of value to terrain. And I think, especially stuff like VTTs, you start to see how important line of sight is even. And pathways and how do we get up there? How do I handle this difficult terrain? And those are all good things to have people think about.
The one thing that I've really enjoyed with VTTs is the ability to, and I haven't really enforced it much, but to have lighting conditions that mean that dark vision and low light vision actually matter.
Absolutely.
These guys have 120 feet of dark vision. You've only got 60 feet of dark vision, or you're the human guy standing in the middle there with, with your torch and a little bit of dim vision beyond it. And they're pasting you from distance because they can see you, you can't see them.
Yeah. And literally in the system, you'd be like, the player's like, I can't see them. I'm like, yep. That's how it is for you. You can't see them. They can see you, but you cannot see them. Oh, this isn't very fair. Life's hard, get out. Or some light vision goggles.
Yeah.
But you are currently getting pasted because the bad guys have longer range dark vision than you, and that's good. That's an interesting iteration of stuff.
That was something that was more difficult before. Like if you're in person and you have a map in front of you, if you've got one person, you got one dwarf in the party or an orc in the party or something, and they can see the bad guys, but no one else can. Couldn't really have that on table because unless you're saying that you either put the miniatures out, in which case everybody knows where they are, and then I'll shoot for this square, or you happen to pick the right square, well done, or you kind of pass a note to the player and say, well, this is where these guys are. I'm going to draw these 6 letters out on these squares, and the note says they're in B and D, and they can spend an action to communicate that with the players. Whereas now you can just literally set tokens to have whatever vision is applicable, and the player can see the token, but the player can see the enemy tokens, but the rest of the party can't, and it's really nifty.
It's really good because you can have the effective fog of war, and you can also have actually this guy's invisible, but you can see them, and I know where they are as a GM. I know exactly where they are.
It's a little bit of effort to set up and set the tokens up, but I think the juice is worth the squeeze.
Absolutely. So that's been a lot about kind of combat scale maps and using maps and terrain to make fights a bit more interesting. Is there anything to be said for larger scale terrain, or is that a different topic?
That's
like
sort of
map overland travel and stuff.
Yeah, the hex crawling idea.
It's a bit of a different topic.
I think that's different. I guess the only thing that we haven't really talked about, I guess, is hazards.
Yes.
So we kind of mentioned it with, say, pushing people off stuff, but like, you're having a fight in a clock tower, should you have a large swinging bell, potentially knocking people out and knocking people off platforms. I mean, they can add, but they can also just seem like, sometimes the effects are stretching it,
Yeah.
Felt like they had to have a table here to do some stuff, but I don't know, it doesn't really make a huge amount of sense.
All right. If you've got any cool ideas for terrain features or optional rules involving getting, stuff going in your game, you can contact us on our Discord or at party@theadventuringparty.net. But for the moment, may your maps be mostly visible to you, and your GM have a lot of hazards for your bad guys to be pushed into. But for now, this party's over.
You've been listening to The Adventuring Party. We're a ragtag collective of desperate souls, striving for truth in a world of tabletop gone mad. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter. You can email us at party@theadventuringparty.net. Although, between you and me, the best place to track us down is Discord. Check the show notes for a link. This podcast released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike version 3 license, which is like free, but with extra steps. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you next week.